As usual, I had grandiose ideas of making a whole game and showing off a finished product in this video, but that didn't pan out this week. Sometimes you stick your pinky toe slightly outside of your comfort zone and fall hundreds of feet to a laggy and error-filled death. But before we get into that, let's talk about visual noise. Let me explain. If we fill a screen with blocks, noise can be described as any method for giving each of those blocks a random value, as shown by their color. Some of these methods are famous and have names. White noise, for example, is the simplest possible way to create noise. Each block gets up individually and says, "I don't care about the rest of you guys," takes a random number, and sits down. If we do this for every block, we have a very noisy screen with no discernible patterns. White noise has nearly infinite uses, but nothing we're interested in today. Instead, a friend of mine and I worked together to come up with this interesting method for creating noise. First, pick a bunch of random blocks to independently give some value between 0 and 100. These blocks have now been colored. 0 for red, 100 for also red. The next step is to find all of the uncolored blocks that are next to the colored ones. We'll choose one of these blocks at random and assign it the same value as the block it's next to, plus or minus some value between -10 and +10. Of course, we can't have anything less than 0 or bigger than 100, so we'll cap it at those values. If an uncolored block is next to more than one colored block, we'll take the average. If we keep choosing random adjacent uncolored blocks like this, we'll eventually fill up the board. That's cool. I'm not really sure what I would use this for, but oh, wait a minute. Don't some of these kind of look like tiny islands? That's when I had a new idea. Instead of starting with a bunch of random blocks at the beginning, let's just set one block in the center to 100 and expand out from there. We'll also force the new blocks to decrease by setting the new values between -10 and +9, then -10 and +8, and so on as we get further from the center. Once a block reaches 0, we'll call it dead and not color any more blocks adjacent to it. Okay, we've created the Eye of Sauron.
That's cool and all, but what? You're just going to be walking around on a giant rainbow circle? That's not a fun game at all.
No, you fool! Now that we've generated this near-perfect circle, let's set all of the uncolored blocks to be water. Any colored blocks less than 2.5 will set to be a shoreline. 2.5 to 35 will be sandy beaches, 35 to 65 will be grassy plains and hills, and everything over 65 will be a dense forest. We can also generate a smaller circle and plop down a volcano because volcanoes are cool. Now we're cooking. And I'll admit, that's just about as far as I got. Yeah. Okay, so maybe you understand noise now, maybe you don't. Luckily, none of that applies to why chunks lag. I just wanted to explain my little island to you. It's my baby. But now that I got an island, this is where the true pain began. For an island that fits in a 1000 by 1000 block square, there are around 500,000 blocks that make up the island itself. Double it to 2000 by 2000 and you've got 2 million blocks total. 4 times what we had before. Thinking about it in terms of an open world, exploration-based game, walking only 2,000 blocks in one direction and then hitting a wall isn't very much at all. Even a small world in Terraria is over 4,000 blocks across and has more than 5 million blocks total. But here's the side of things that you wouldn't normally consider unless you were tackling a programming project yourself or watching this video right now. Every single frame, every single time the game updates, your computer has to go through every single one of those little blocks, even if they aren't doing anything, at least just to check if they're on the screen or not. As much as I would like to put a quantum computer in the minimum specs, I also want people to play my game, so we're going to have to try a different strategy. Enter chunks. What is a chunk? I'm going to pull a definition out of my butt here and say that a chunk is all of the things in a particular area of a game map. If we chop the island up into a grid of squares, then everything inside of each square is part of its own chunk. Now that we've defined these chunks, we can keep all of the chunks that are on screen and delete the ones that are off screen. Now we've got way less blocks to deal with every single frame. But that's actually not enough. Each of these blocks is a copy of a tiny program called an object. GameMaker is actually really inefficient at handling objects. Generally, a few hundred is fine, but once you get into the thousands, things start to slow down. Even with these 32 by 32 pixel blocks on a 1920 by 1080 monitor, there will be almost 2,000 blocks on screen at once. To further improve this issue, we'll have to make use of something called canvases. If you're familiar with GameMaker, GameMaker calls them surfaces, but they're actually called canvases in the real world. Canvases hold onto an image and can be displayed to the screen, so they're really useful for making patterns in real time. In this case, we can put everything in a chunk on a canvas, and then we can go ahead and delete all of the associated objects. Then we only need one object per chunk to display its canvas. If a chunk is 16 by 16 blocks, this brings our object count down from almost 2,000 to just about 12. Now we're cooking with gas.
Now you're cooking with gas.
All that's left is implementation. I tried a lot of different versions of things that all stem from this idea. Deleting and creating objects myself, saving canvases of the entire map, running out of memory, pseudo-multithreading, that's a fun phrase to look up. And it all failed. GameMaker just couldn't do it. Even at the bare minimum, with canvas creation and creating and deleting objects, there was still lag when crossing over chunks. At this point, I'm doubtful that there's anything at all that can be done. Now, I'd like to tell you all about each minute path I took, each trial and failure, but I am out of visuals to distract you with, so instead of rambling endlessly at you, I'm just going to end it here. Bye!